Hey everyone, Rodney here at Cleaves Tech, and today I'm going to show you how to make use of the variation feature in Fooocus to give you more control over image generation and do image to image, and even better, also control things like lighting and colors. Looking to do cool lighting effects, but prompting is not getting the results? Then the variation feature is what you may need. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be covering the variation option in Fooocus. That would be very subtle or very strong. People may not realize it's actually an extremely powerful tool that you can make use of in Fooocus for many different purposes. And in some regards, it can be considered in the same regard as some of the image prompts that are available. And I'm probably going to get a lot of people that are surprised at that because they haven't explored it. But I'm going to show you how to make use of a lot of this, and hopefully you'll find other ways once you understand how it works. So initially, we're going to just drop an image in here to start off with. You can obviously take one from the top that you've just generated. That's fine as well. It can work for real images as well. Now, if you're wondering how that prompt got put in there automatically, well, if you enable this tag in Fooocus in your run.bat file, if you have an empty prompt here and you drop an image in, it will fill in the prompt for you. So we'll start with this. Now, if we go to very subtle, a lot of you probably already know this. We hit generate, we're now going to get a slightly different image. And for this right now, everything I have is set at the default if you're following along. So we've generated a couple images. That's enough for you to get the idea. If you've never used the vary function, well, this is what it does. The very subtle will just change the image ever so slightly, give you slight variations on the image. Now, if we could click on the very strong and we do the same thing, we're going to get different results. And now we have our much different image than we had before. So that's the basic use of the variation option, but that's actually probably 5% of what it can do. Let's step this up a little bit, and I'm gonna show you the next thing you can use it for. But before I do that, I do want to give you more of an idea on how this works. So the very subtle and very strong, all that does is it sets variables in the background on the strength of the denoise value. What happens is when we hit one of these buttons, it regenerates the image based upon the original image. It adds a certain amount of noise to it and goes from there. So with the very subtle, think of it as the easiest way would be it adds 0.5 is what it adjusts to, the denoise strength. So it's adding basically 50% noise and then generating from there. That will not have any major changes as you saw before. But when we go to very strong, that is about 0.85, I believe. And then we'll see much higher changes because it's adding 85% noise to the image. Now, it'll still influence the original image, your colors and things like that, usually a similar pose, but for the most part, it's going to make some drastic changes, as we can see in here. The background's different and everything else. Now, there is another option I'm going to show you here just so you understand, because we don't have any other adjustments here. We only have the 50 or 85 and nothing in between. So what we need to do is go to the advanced tab over here, check off developer debug mode. There's actually a couple options we're going to be checking off in here when we're working. First, we'll go into the control tab. I want to mix image prompt and vary upscale. So what this means is, because what I'm going to be showing you after is going to apply some of the image prompt stuff with the vary and upscale. So in order to use those together, we do have to check that off. If we don't check that off, then things won't work because it can only use one or the other and not mix them. Under the debug tools tab, we want to scroll down, and this one right here is what we're looking for. Forced overwrite of denoising strength of vary. Those are exactly what those options are at the top. The 0.5 for the subtle and then 0.85 for the strong. If those are the only settings you're going to use, then you don't need to go in here and change this. But basically, I find you're going to be using that quite a bit because every image is going to be a little bit different on how it gets the results that you want. Each method that I'm going to show you is going to usually use a slightly different amount of value in here. So you will see me changing that quite often. But for the moment, we're going to leave that off because I do want to show you everything you can kind of do without having to go in there and dig in there if you don't want to. I'm going to try to change the style of the image next. So let's go into the styles. We're going to disable all these. I'm going to go for a comic. Let's go with, I'll check off a couple of the comic book ones. Flat 2D art. And we're just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to change this over to the speed settings since I don't need it high quality. And let's drop in another image. Let's try this one. Okay. Now, once we've done that, always go back, check your styles, because sometimes these things can get changed depending on what you're changing in Fooocus. So it's always a good idea before you start generating that any of your styles haven't changed. We're just going to go ahead with that. And now I'm not going to try to do it on the subtle, because subtle will not overpower that original image. So you're never going to get anything comic book like. I'll just add in here as well. I find sometimes that makes a difference. It can help give you that extra nudge. Now we'll go ahead and hit generate on this one. Okay. And we've switched over, and it's a little bit more comic booky, but it's not super comic booky. You know, at this point I'd say that, and it really doesn't look anything like the original. So those are two downfalls. If I wanted to keep it like the original and I wanted it more comic booky. So in order to accomplish that, there's a couple different ways. One is you can try different prompts, you can try different styles, or you can also go in and increase the overwrite strength. But what's going to happen when you do that, when you override the denoising strength, it's going to change that picture too much. So my first instance here would be to go in and actually use a different model. Now, what I'll do is in the base model, I will mention you can, if you're ever looking for a specific model, you can just start typing in here and it'll start coming up. You can do that in any of these. You can change and search in the boxes. You can also do it in your presets as well. You can start typing in there if you're searching for something. So we've changed our model over the Cheyenne model for this. That one's geared more towards, it's not for photographic. So if I'm trying to switch over from a realistic style over to something like a comic, it's going to be much easier if I change the model over. So in here, we're going to just change that model over. I'm going to keep this still on very strong. Okay, so now we have our woman wearing a blue dress, but I still don't consider that to be looking like that. If I was going for that looking the same, it's not bad, but I think we can do better. So we've changed the model. That gives us much more of the cartoon look, but the problem we're running into is it's changing the image too much. But if we go with subtle and do this, we'll probably not get as good of a result out of it. As we can see here, even with that specific model, on the subtle change, it still has a hard time doing it. So that's not the solution either. Let's go back to very strong, because that's what we want. I want that more comic book look. As I said, we could go in and we could adjust the denoising strength again, but we still do have other options here. And that would be the image prompts. That's why we checked off previously in the advanced settings. We check this off because we want to be able to now mix the image prompts. So we've got this in here to start with to help keep that image in place. Now I'm going to drop that into here. I'm going to put this on Pyrocani. And I'm going to drop one in here under the image prompt, and we'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it at the default settings. Let's hit generate. Now we have a much closer image to the original. Still, maybe we don't want it to be changed so much. So at that point, we've already done the image prompts, and I could increase the strength the stops at. I could increase this style strength as well. And under the debug tools, we're going to set this to forced overwrite instead to 0.8. I'm going to reduce it a little bit. That way it stays more consistent with the original image. Now we'll hit generate. And we now have our image, which I'd say, for me, it did a pretty good job. And I'd be pretty satisfied with that. So that's one way that you can transfer over a style. In that sense, you can change a picture from one style to another by using your style tags, by using the upscale and vary, and then mixing in your image prompts. You can guide things much more. I will mention, if you weren't using this feature here, and if you just use these two settings we went ahead and generated, we probably get very similar results to what we just got, because I'm forcing the model and everything else. But this does give you an additional level of control. The next thing I'm going to show you, if we wanted to do, I have an image here. I have some excellent art skills here. I went ahead and I drew this nice beach scene with a palm tree. I'm going to remove this. As you can see, since we changed these down here and I dropped it in and it did the prompt, is what I was mentioning. You want to watch these styles because it will usually recheck those. That's one thing I do find annoying, and hopefully that does someday gets changed. So we're going to go with just a flat 2D art for this one. And I'm going to leave the model on the Cheyenne model since that does well with the look that I'm going for. Well, you know what? Let's go with Juggernaut. We're going to do Juggernaut. I think this will give us a better idea. I want to show you a couple different possibilities you can do with this. I'll leave it on the speed setting since I'm not super picky about the quality. It's just for demonstrations. And we're going to leave this on very subtle, and I'm going to hit generate. And as would be expected when we do this, because we're on the very subtle, it's not going to change that initial image there that much. Our image to image out pretty well, even on the subtle settings. Now, if you wanted to change that even more, we could go to the, as I showed you before, the very strong, and we could do the same thing. And for that, we get slightly more detailed images because we have that on a stronger setting. But I do have this set as simple flat 2D art. Now, what would happen if we went ahead and I'm going to set this to, now let's go with these, and we should get a much different image out of this. Okay, so we have two different images here. AI does take a lot of artistic freedom here and changes them pretty drastically. But I could add more to my prompt if I wanted to. We could even put a tornado in here and it will now generate it, because with that on such a high value, it should have no problem generating based upon that. So I can change those images quite a bit now because of that. And if I wanted to change it even more, I could go into that debug menu and change that slider even more. Now, it didn't create a tornado, but it did create tornado conditions. So that's good enough for what I wanted to show when it comes to the tornado. Now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into some more of the advanced stuff that you can do with the Vary feature. One of the advantages is it can give you an awful lot of control. For this one, we're going to set this to 0.65. And then I've gone ahead and I've created this wonderful image here of a black rectangle and a green circle. Dark cave exiting into the jungle. It doesn't matter which one you have it on if we have it overriding it. So that doesn't matter. And everything else is all set. So we'll go ahead and generate. Now the idea behind what I'm doing here is using this along with the prompt to guide it. So the green is more the exit of the tunnel. Then you have, for the color of the jungle as well. And then the black keeps those outer areas much darker. This is, I find, usually pretty hard to prompt for and get exactly what you want. And you could do some of this sort of stuff in the image prompt as well, but it's going to be a lot harder to get what you want for the results. You can combine these with the image prompts, which I'll show you after. This works pretty well depending on what you're looking for. So this one, we got this image, and then we got this one. Depending on how you apply, change the denoising strength, we can make it either follow more strictly and get closer to this image here if we had a little bit lower denoising strength, or we could change it so it opens things up more. It may not be as round. So adjusting that will affect how much of an impact that image there has on the results. Because if we were to go with 0.85 on here, we're going to probably get a much more open cave. It won't be quite as dark, but we're still going to have that green area more towards the middle. As you can see, it's not as defined because we've set that denoising strength at a much higher value, but we can still use it to guide that generation. We can use different shapes, and it doesn't have to be perfect. When you're using a denoising strength value like we're using here, it is just a general influence, so you don't have to get the shape exact or anything like that. And you can see the influence that that had on that. Even with the denoising strength set to very high, you can get some pretty good results. Like this was one of the images. Now, I would have a very difficult time prompting for something like this. The vary function, it made it much easier to get exactly what I wanted out of that. Okay, now for our next one, I'm going to use a similar image, a little bit different though. And that would be my cave image. Okay, so for this one, very basic. I used a gradient just to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do with this. A man reaching up from the bottom of a dark cave, light shining down. Now I've set the denoising strength here on 0.6 for this one to give it a shot. I want to keep as much of this surrounding area as dark as possible. And we'll go ahead and generate an image. Okay, so we have our images. The first one, we have somebody falling. And then our second one. And I got roughly what I was hoping for, not exactly, and that's where it comes in, editing these images, tweaking them around, changing those settings, and also adjusting your prompt to get what you want. But this does definitely give you a huge assist when it comes to getting the results that you might be looking for an image like this, because this could be very hard to do with just prompting. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to do something similar to this. I'll show you how to influence the lighting more. Now, this is a little bit different. Be aware of how the settings work with this. So I'm going to be using the image prompt here, let's say. Go ahead with that. Use Pyrocani for the structure and everything. And then this image file I've created, that'll be for the lighting effect. And I've lined that up roughly for the face for what I'm looking for. And we have under advanced, I have the denoising strength set to 0.8 at the moment for this. For something like this, we don't want that to have too much influence. We still want to be able to actually generate. And I'll put a prompt in here: gorgeous woman in the shadows, casual and volumetric lighting. Now, mentioning certain types of lighting can definitely help guide that. Otherwise, it may not know what you're trying to accomplish as much, and you might get some different results than what you're expecting. And let's change up the model on this one just for fun. Zavi Chroma, and we'll hit generate. Okay, not too bad. Not exactly what I was shooting for. I was hoping to get more of this one I did get the hard edge, but this kind of is washed out more, whereas this was what I was going for more, but with the hard edge. But that gives you an idea when you're doing these. These do take a little bit more work, but you do have that ability to control the lighting more. You can change those files as well. Can be the model that you're using. That's another one that I've noticed as well. Each model can definitely react differently to how that works. So if you're not getting the results that you're looking for from one specific model, you can try a different model to see how it reacts to that. Okay, so we get our lighting, and as you can see, this model reacted a little bit differently to it, but that should give you an idea of how you can use these files for different lighting. You can just use one color, just if you want to change the tint of the color. There's all sorts of ways you can utilize that, get the results that you're looking for. Now I'm going to show you one other way you can use this as well. This is in combination with the image prompts and everything. I'm going to go ahead and I've created this here, just an image file with a gradient. It says the deep. Now in here as well, I'll remove this, and I'm going to use this as well. Now we'll choose CPDS. Okay, so we're going to use this to guide the letters. Do we have to? No, but it does help having that structure for these letters. And you'll notice I stuck with just a white and black, because that I find usually is going to work better. And let's change the prompt in here. So I have movie title screen, the deep, cracked blue letters, breaking apart, underwater view of the ocean, giant sea creature, plesiosaurus. Okay, so we're all set there. We'll go ahead. We'll use this Chinook still. I like that one. And under the advanced, well, we're going to change this. I'm going to use a 0.75 for this one. You know what? Let's go with 0.8. I think 0.8 will work. And now, as I said, the letters would probably stay together pretty decent. because of the prompt and everything else. But I found when doing something like this, it's even better to still use that as the underlying structure, because you can mix those things in. And we're just going to go ahead and generate. Okay. Now, I do notice one thing I probably should have done a little different, and that is because the letters didn't really crack much. I mean, these did a little bit. So these did pretty well, but I know what I did wrong here. So if I go into the image prompt, these are pretty high. I found that if I lower these in this instance, because normally I would need these much stronger if I was just using that as the guide. But since I have the this image here as well, and think of it as I have 1, then 2, and then in the prompt where it says the deep, it's going to keep those letters together much better. So under the image prompt, I don't need as much guidance there. So let's go ahead. We're going to try this again and see if I get a little bit better results. Okay, so these look like they came out much better. Yeah, I like the results of these. And I find doing it this way when it comes to doing any text like that, it works pretty well, in my opinion, as far as keeping everything in order. So, yeah. Now, I might have gotten somewhat similar results if I hadn't used this method and I had described it, everything else, but I didn't have to put much work into it to guide the image that I wanted. I got exactly what I was expecting here. And that's just a few of the ways you can use this. There's a whole bunch of other options. I'm going to actually be posting some more videos on different ideas on how to use this feature and some of the other ideas that have come up with on my Patreon. And that should get you going with taking advantage of the variation feature and focus to get better images. Anyone has any other ideas how to use the feature to get interesting results? Please leave in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please do consider hitting the like button. And also, I do have a Patreon page if you'd like to help support the channel. And I do plan on adding more videos there as well to go more into depth on some of these topics. I do want to thank all my current supporters who have donated. It really does make a difference. And I do want to give a shout out to South Bay J, who is a supporter of the channel and also created this great Laura called Flower Style that you can check out on Civet AI, which I will leave a link to in the description. Thanks for watching and have fun creating.